So a few years ago, I came across John McWhorter and John McWhorter and Glenn Loury talking about Ta-Nehisi Coates. Now, I haven't actually read Ta-Nehisi Coates' books, but I have read his Atlantic articles, and I don't know if I can get behind this bandwagon of blaming all plight of the black community on white folk. I understand, I understand the notion that there are barriers in our system that disproportionately affect minority groups, but I don't think that this is the causation of a post-slavery culture. I'm fairly certain that the equality of opportunity is actually there, and there are opportunities that are just being passed over by communities at large based upon the value structures put in place by the cultures themselves. Now, I'm not saying that the cultures themselves are dispossessing themselves on purpose, but what I am saying is that there are inherent methods by which cultures propagate their own succession in community involvement, family structure. I'm not good at discussing these things. I'm very good at listening and understanding the depths of the discussions themselves, and this one is one of them. So I hope you enjoy. And if I'm missing something, this is one of like 100 discussions I've watched on this, and it's just the highlights in the one discussion of the 100. So it's 0.5% of everything I've seen. So this is the best I can do. I'll get another one. And I've listened to Ta-Nehisi Coates. I've listened to about 10 talks of him talking for at least an hour. So this stuff doesn't not line up with who the guy is. And
as of his piece, where he basically asserts that the victory and the rule of Trump means that America is simply a cesspool of barely veiled racism through and through, and that there's nothing that can possibly be done. I think that with that thesis, this collection of his pieces that has just come out has become the occasion upon which the white people who are waiting in line at Zabar's and reading the New Yorker on their phones are realizing that Coates hates them every bit as much as he hates the white people, quote unquote, out there who voted for Trump. I'm not sure how they missed that from his earlier writings, but I guess you could say it was between the lines. But I think that a critical mass of people are realizing he isn't just jumping on, Mrs. Western Pennsylvania who voted for this fool in office. He doesn't like these people who love him either, even though he's essentially said it. And I think that a lot of them are insulted or they realize that if he really does hate even his educated white fans as much as he hates all of the quote unquote heathen out there, then there's something a little bit, shall we say, theatrical, performative about his vision, because we all know racism exists, but we also know that it's not 1950. And Ta-Nehisi Coates writes as if it's 1950, except that everybody is politer about it. I think people are actually seeing it.
I've been speculating for a while based on my own assessment of Mr. Coates' writings, and you characterize my view exactly in saying of it, that it's performative, that it's engaging in a certain kind of theatrical presentation, demonstration, artfully, that appeals to something in the American psyche, or the white liberal American psyche, or the New York literary establishment psyche, or something like that. I've been thinking, oh, this is a bubble. This can't last. This is too thin. This is too shrill. This is too predictable. This is too, pat. America is really much more complicated than that. It can't possibly be about race. You're not telling me that today in 2017, this is seamlessly connected to Jim Crow and slavery, and it's all about the same old story of white supremacy. I understand that, a propagandist would say that, but I can't believe a serious analytical journalist would take that view. And I've been thinking the whole thing's a house of cards and it's bound to blow over at any moment. I've been thinking that if you tell somebody there is no such thing as black culture that might have some pathological dimensions to it, albeit generated historically by the oppression of black people, but nevertheless taking on a life of its own, and they dismiss you with the back of their hand, saying, there ain't nothing wrong with black folks that ending white supremacy wouldn't fix. I kept thinking that, that can't possibly carry the day. Soon enough, thinking people will wake up and they'll have a cup of coffee in the morning and they'll clear their heads and they'll say, oh, come on, that's bunk. And it wasn't happening. I kept thinking the bubble would have to burst. Just like when you have a stock market, you have a bear market and everything, a bull market, I should say, and everything is up and up and up. Eventually, it has to come to a reckoning, and I kept thinking so. And I've been disappointed time and time again. Now, you put on the table an interesting hypothesis, and you're saying, in effect, that some of these boosters who give out the prizes and who write the columns and who script the things that go on television, and Chuck Todd at Meet the Press referring to Ta-Nehisi Coates as if he was some kind of prophet, the Martin Luther King of our day, that they wake up to the fact that he hates them just as much as he hates the alt-right and the white nationalists.
Also the passive white voters for Trump who didn't care enough about race to keep him out of office, the people out there, so to speak. But my issue with the Coates phenomenon is that I find it racist, and I mean genuinely racist, in that the elevation of that dorm lounge performance art as serious thought is a kind of soft bigotry, which is as nauseating as it is unintended. I know that it's unintentional. I know nobody means it, but it's racism. And this is why it bothers me. Because every time I walk around this fucking city, and I deal with a lot of, intellectual whites, I work on a campus full of them, and it's become a kind of shibboleth of being of that class, that when you're talking to, especially a black, I guess you might call me a thinking person, that you were supposed to do your genuflection to Coates. And it's a kind of a signal that white people give somebody like me. And it's not only people with PhDs. The idea is that you're supposed to believe in that God. And every time that happens, and you talk about how racism is something that we supposedly encounter every time we walk out into the street, I would definitely say at least once a week I have to deal with this. Some very earnest white person who's, assuming that I think of that person's writing as scripture, or frankly, as brilliantly reasoned. And I feel personally insulted because to me, they are letting pass, I hate saying this about something or somebody, but I guess I have to. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. They are letting pass as genius something which they never would if it was not a black person doing it. And when they do it, I feel like I'm in that scene in Annie Hall with Woody Allen, where he's thinking that the people around the table, the Gentiles around the table, are seeing him as this pushcart Jewish person with, the payas and everything. I feel like this person, and we're talking about some enlightened and often famous people, that person, when they do that genuflection, they're seeing me as some thick-lipped, step-and-fetch-it, drawling person in overalls. And I think, is that how they're judging me? Are they telling me that I'm so wonderful because they think that it's a good thing because I'm brown? It makes me sick. It has nothing to do with Ta-Nehisi Coates as an individual. I don't think he's done anything wrong. My indictment is against the people who are elevating him out of what can only be called bigotry.
There's a scene in there where the black character who is has a girlfriend who's white and makes a visit to the family home is confronted by the father of the girlfriend, who earnestly insists he wants him to know that he voted for President Obama twice, and he would have done so a third time if the man had been running the greatest president of his lifetime. Okay, and of course the point of that scene is that this unctuous kind of almost self-flagellating demonstration of fealty to some idea that the black character is presumed to hold. I mean,
that's my life. Yeah.
This is exactly what you're describing. Now, when I saw the film, all the black people in the theater were practically out of their seats at this scene because they got it. They got why it was offensive for this white guy to be telling the black character that the white guy had voted for Barack Obama, as if to try to win some kind of bona fides with the black character, as if he thought that who he voted for mattered to the black character, or that his voting for Barack Obama made it okay. For all he knows, the black character didn't vote or thought Obama was an asshole. For all he knew, but he didn't take him seriously as an individual person enough. He projected something on him. So anyway, people should understand why you're upset with this soft bigotry of virtue signaling through the person of Mr. Coates. Viewers here who haven't seen Thomas Chatterton Williams' New York Times review of We Were 8 Years in Power, Ta-Nehisi Coates' latest book, who haven't seen it, that Williams says, in effect, and I hope I don't do discredit by this quick summary, that Coates' immersion in a racialist conception of American society, everything viewed through the lens of race, is the mirror image or the flip side of a white nationalist conception about American society in which everything is viewed in terms of race. And Williams, in the review, includes extensive reportage from his interview of Spencer, Richard Spencer, the white nationalist leader, and has Spencer saying back to him, in effect, I'm glad that people are eating up Ta-Nehisi Coates. I'm glad that they're taking it in because it's a thoroughly racialized conception. It's racial essentialism at its utmost. And that primes them. They really believe in race, these liberals who are reading Ta-Nehisi Coates. And that means I can flip them, says Richard Spencer. The day will come, given their belief in race, when I can persuade them that they're white. Ta-Nehisi Coates wants them to regret and lament and eschew the fact that they're white. Richard Spencer dreams of a day in which them seeing themselves as white, they'll get tired of hating themselves and flip over to the side of being proud of being white.
Have we not perhaps hit a wall in modern America? I don't think that's a stupid point. He might have something there. I think that both of us feel that more could have happened if it weren't for, frankly, dialogue that people like him have a way of fostering, although I don't think we can nail exactly what the role is. But maybe we've hit a wall since about 1990, let's say. What's changed?
Well, I think my response, which is that what's changed is that the constraint is not a closed door. The constraint is the developed capacities for us to perform. That whereas in the not-too-distant past, the opportunity would not have been there. At Columbia University or at Brown University, they weren't bending over backwards to appoint people of color to their faculty. They weren't investing money in diversifying recruiting and so forth and so on. They weren't deeply steeped in the ethos of affirmative action. They weren't flagellating themselves because they were only 7% and not 10% African American. All of that has changed. But whereas in 1960 it was a quarter of African American children born to women who weren't married, it's now 2/3.
I can interrupt you very quickly. Coates would say, but that's because of deindustrialization and there's nowhere for the men to work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
No, and my answer to that is take people, including our black people, seriously enough to think that they have command over how we live, and that the exigencies of deindustrialization are constraints that affect us, but they don't define us. And that if we were willing to make our narrative different, instead of directing it to white people, presuming that they were moral agents who could be appealed to at the Atlantic Monthly's readership and elsewhere to make America better, if we were to take the same degree of intensity of moral criticism and direct it at ourselves about how we're living, how we're raising our children, and how our people are behaving, we're gunning each other down in the bucket load in the cities of this country, and the only thing you have to say about it is that police are racist and police brutality. What about the barbarity of the people who are conducting these acts? What about the absence of a sense of human decency that has become so widespread in our community that it results in this outcome? Of course, there are historical reasons for it. That doesn't mean that we can't change it. Do you really think we have to? Nobody is coming to save us. I don't care how many guilty white liberals who have had their latte in the morning and want to pick up the Atlantic, nod their heads in affirmation at Ta-Nehisi Coates. Nobody is coming to save us. If we don't raise our children, educate them, form households which are healthy and develop relationships in our interactions with one another which foster our ability to seize these opportunities, impoverished peasants from other parts of the world will come here and pick up the gold that's lying on the street, and we'll have nothing but a lament. In 50 years from now, Ta-Nehisi Coates may still be being read, but you'll have a population of people who are so bereft of the capacity to perform in the modern world that they'll be wards of the state. And that's not racism, okay? I mean, you can call it what you want to. The possibility of doing better lies in front of us. The country has demonstrated that malleability. We need to man and woman up.
And I think it's an unfortunate message for so many smart, concerned people to be taking. It makes sense, the Coates. So many people have said to me in private, they would never say it in public. In private, why in the world would that be your message to your son? I'd be very interested to see the book that his son is going to write in about 20 years. But for him, it makes perfect sense that you would say that because you're protecting them against something that's so preternaturally implacable as this white supremacy. But, there is hope. Just as right now as it happens here in Queens, some sun just has come through clouds. There is some hope in that I think a certain segment of not only the white, but the black reading public is finally coming to understand that this prophet has a message that is somewhat out of step with reality and more to the point is of no use. It's interesting, quickly. About 6 months ago, I was talking to some very nice white people, educated upper class white people. One of them a New Yorker, one of them Australian, actually. It was interesting, the gradients in their response. They had been to one of these sessions where Ta-Nehisi's Between the World and Me was assigned for discussion. And I'd had one glass of wine. I usually it's like judo. As soon as he comes up, I mumble something and we move on. But I had a glass of wine. And I said, do you two realize that man hates you? And they had never thought about it that way. And I said, think about it. And I gave the 3 passages that I've memorized about it. And no, I still have not read it, but I know about those passages. And I said, you realize it's not just this person out in Pennsylvania. He hates you. And I said, do you think you deserve it? And the American one said, well, I like to know what the roots of all of this hatred is. I want to know how he feels. I'm glad to have read it. And I said, but no. Do you think you deserve his hatred? I'm not talking about cops. Do you deserve it? And I could tell that on that, it was like trying to make somebody perceive ultraviolet light, because the person knew what I meant, but you weren't supposed to say that. And I said, do you realize that discussion session, you weren't supposed to discuss it. You were supposed to worship it. Do you realize that was a religious service that you were at? And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, you weren't allowed to say anything except hallelujah. The Australian got it. He said, well, actually, yeah, that's true. But the American, I could tell that they got it. But that just wasn't to be said. Not that she was trying to save my feelings as a black person, because she and I are friends, but she's just not supposed to say that.